Right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started today. Today's session will be an hour with time for Q&A throughout the session, so feel free to drop those in the chat. I'll be watching that. Or if you want to submit those anonymously too, you can send them just to myself. This webinar will be recorded for future viewing, so please note that participation in this webinar qualifies for free CME credit, and that link will be provided at the end of the webinar. Also, any resources mentioned during today's call will also be made available after the presentation. We do encourage questions throughout, and like I mentioned, please submit those using the chat function. The presenter today has no financial relationship to disclose, and this webinar is approved for one AMA PRA category credit. So I am super pleased today to introduce our speaker, Ethan Nkana. Ethan began his hospital administration journey as a human resources intern after earning his bachelor's degree in business administration and public relations. Over the following decade, Ethan would grow his skill set to include leadership roles in hospital finance, physician contracting and compensation, hospital operations, and healthcare strategy. And this extensive training and expertise is underpinned by Ethan's legal and business training, earning his Juris Doctor and Master's in Business Administration from the University of Dayton. And while working in physician contracting, Ethan observed that physicians frequently leave money and value on the table during their contract and salary negotiations with hospital executives. The awareness of the challenge facing physicians hit Ethan close to home, whose mother is an anesthesiologist. Physicians and professional athletes spend 20 to 25 years training to become experts in their respective disciplines. When physicians and athletes go pro or complete residency training, they're met with complex, high-value contracts that they have received no education or training in negotiating. And so Ethan is with Rocky Mountain Physician Agency, and they advocate for physicians to get the value they have earned in their salary and contract by using the same industry-leading physician salary data that hospitals use. The Rocky Mountain Physician Agency serves physicians of all specialties, from residency to retirement, whether the physician is currently in contract or planning for an upcoming contract. So with that, welcome, Ethan, and I will turn it over to you and let you share your screen.
Awesome, Lindsay. Thank you so much. And before we get started, I'll just do a quick audio check that you can hear me, maybe a thumbs up, and then video check. You can see my glowing face this morning. Fantastic. So before we get going, thanks, Dr. Morgan. Before we get going, I just want to say thank you to Lindsay. She has been so supportive through this process of helping this education come to life along with Dr. Schaefer and Amy. This is the first time we get to meet, but just really grateful to have this platform to share this really important education. Like I love doing this, so the fact that it's 6:30 in the morning doesn't even register to me. Like I'm ready to rock. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to share my screen. And Lindsay, if you can just let me know if you can see the title screen. Fantastic. So at the end of our time today, the physicians who are on the call, who are listening to the recording, will know how to negotiate a fair contract. And for many of you, that may mean renegotiate. So we'll talk about not just what you can renegotiate, but also how you can renegotiate your contracts. So before I get started, I just want to talk about the gap that I help to bridge in terms of the knowledge about contracts. I call this the three T's. Physicians don't have time, tools, or training to negotiate their contracts. And sometimes what happens is that leaves doctors at a very costly disadvantage in their contract discussions with employers. So I will share everything I learned in my experience as a hospital executive to help you all know how you can not only have fair pay, but also make sure you have adequate clinical support, you have the resources to do your job, and that you have a schedule that honors your life balance. So by the end of our time today, you are going to learn three specific skills that you will be able to use at your job, or if you're thinking about potentially moving your practice at your next job. First, how can you speed up education loan debt? Now, you might think that's just a problem for rookie doctors or physicians early in their career. But I'll tell you, I was doing education for the University of Michigan, their plastic surgery group. And as I was sharing some strategies about getting the employer to pay down education loan debt, PSLF, public service loan forgiveness, the program director said, wait a second, I work for an academic institution. Am I eligible for PSLF? He didn't realize he was eligible to have his loans forgiven, having been with University of Michigan for 18 years. So when I came back in the spring to do the education again for the next cohort, he told me he had $18,000 in his education loan debt forgiven simply by registering for PSLF. So again, this is not just an early career issue. This is something that can impact physicians throughout the duration of their career, and I'll help you find some strategies to pay that down as quickly as possible. Burnout is a growing topic of concern for physicians, not just from a lifestyle perspective, but also physician suicide. And so we'll talk about how can you prioritize your lifestyle and balance in your work so that way you're able to give patients the best of yourself. And then lastly, I know physicians, I've worked with physicians long enough. My mom's a physician. I would wager that none of you got into the business of medicine to be wealthy, right? But there's a difference between doing it to be wealthy and deserving to be paid fairly. And so we're going to talk about how physicians can be paid fairly for your work, despite the fact that you don't necessarily do it for the money. Just by way of background, and Lindsay did a phenomenal job of giving highlights of kind of where I've been in my career. I sometimes tend to downplay the education part. Like, yeah, I have a law degree, yeah, I have an MBA, because really the reason I'm the best at what I do is because I was on the other side of the table for 15 years. I was a hospital executive. I was the guy sitting next to the CEO saying, well, Dr. Hanlon generated $2.2 million in revenue last year, so how do we get her to three? We need her to be busy. We need to see patients in 12 minutes instead of 15. And what do we make as a hospital off of Dr. Hanlon? And coincidentally, I'm working with a group of 8 OBGYNs right now who are renegotiating their group contract. And just last night, I'd taken them on a tour of the same hospital I used to work at. So it was a little bit of kind of this full circle moment of the place where I was supporting the CEO on behalf of the hospital. Now I get to bring the CEO physicians working for and on behalf of the physicians. So anything in a hospital, I either know it or I've done it. And really, that's what helps me give physicians peace of mind when it comes to, well, what should I expect in the contract? Or what should I ask for? How much should I ask for? The reason I know these things is because I was the guy on the other side saying, oh, Dr. Wergen, it's a standard contract, can't make any changes. So now I can help doctors develop strategies to get around that. And frankly, doctors are experts in medicine, but not contract negotiation. And often, what that means is physicians feel uncomfortable or frustrated, or sometimes they feel as though, well, why didn't they just give me the best offer up front? As a physician, I suspect that many of you do not give patients the second or the third best treatment plan. And then when the patient pushes back, you say, oh, well, actually, I do have a better treatment plan that might have better outcomes. That's not how physicians work. You give the best treatment up front, but that's not how business works. In business, you will never get the best offer first. And so I think there's a little bit of dissonance for physicians who say, well, why didn't they just give me the best offer? Why do we have to go through all of this? And unfortunately, that's just the way the business of medicine is designed. As an executive, as a hospital executive, I don't have to be a better negotiator than you necessarily. I just have to wait you out. I just have to wait for you to get so frustrated with the meetings and the back and forth and the discouragement that eventually you'll just give up. So that's what many hospitals, administration executives are counting on is that physicians will just kind of tap out for, I call it negotiation fatigue, where they just kind of tap out of the process because it's taking so long and they feel like progress might not be made. So, what I'll do today is give you some strategies that can help you stay disciplined in how to ask for a pay raise or a better schedule, more support in a way that will help you actually get the things that you're asking for. And spoiler, it will take discipline. So if you think that the hospital is just gonna keel over now because you have me or this advice, which is amazing, it's not going to be the silver bullet. So it will still take discipline, and more importantly, it will take courage. There's a few myths that I often hear. Some of them are, I think one of the most prevalent is, well, if I'm going to get a salary raise, I've got to leave, and I don't want to leave my patients. But the reality of it is that more than 80% of our clients stay with their current employer for better pay, better resources and support in your clinic, and a schedule that better reflects what your lifestyle goals are. So I want to help kind of debunk that idea that you have to leave your practice in order to get a salary raise or improve your lifestyle. You can do that right where you are, and I'll show you exactly how you do that. Also, if any of you who are in the on the market for looking for an opportunity and someone says, "Oh, it's a standard contract, Dr. Hanlon, you can't change it," you've got to push back. That is, hospital execs are conditioned to say that as a first response. So you must push past that initial resistance, which again, I know doctors are rule followers, and that can be a little bit challenging to do, but I want to encourage you, it will pay off. It's a little bit about me when I'm not working with physicians. I am probably the youngest male volunteer at the Denver Art Museum, which is so much fun. So I get to help people get around the our local art museum. And one of the cool things is like it's all these retired art teachers, and so they know so much about art. And I'm learning a ton. I know zero about art, and so I'm learning that now. Actually, tomorrow is my next volunteer shift, which is probably one of the most fun things I do. I'm also a high school basketball coach in my free time, so I really enjoy mentoring and coaching young men. And then, as Lindsay mentioned, my mom's a physician. So this is more than just a job to me. This is really what I feel like I'm called to do. And she is my biggest supporter in terms of helping me understand the challenges that physicians go through, not just in the work they do, but also the expectations placed on physicians to be experts in absolutely everything, which, as you'll find out, is just not possible. We've been really fortunate to have our insights published nationally on 5 different occasions. I only show this just so that you know I'm not, some dude walking in off the street. This isn't my first rodeo. We've done this a whole bunch. So our writing has been published. I suspect that for many of you who are here or who are seeing this, these are really common. These are familiar names to you, I should say. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. And then we also, let me just make this bigger. We also do a ton of education very similar to this. So as I was talking with Amy and Lindsay before the call, I was just mentioning to them how much I love doing education. That to me is my passion, is educating physician associations, educating, you'll see physician trainees here in just a moment. I'll be at the Digestive Health Week in San Diego here in May for the Gastroenterology Association. So, again, if any of you want to get this education to your group or to your friends or your partners, I'm here. And again, like I love doing this, so it's never a burden. And then, as I mentioned, University of Michigan's, we've had a ton of impact there, but these are all of the residency programs we've educated. So, for those of you who have connections with residency programs or fellowship programs, for those of you who work for residency and fellowship programs, I would like to offer to share education with you. Again, it's something I love to do, and I hope you leave this experience knowing that I'm not selling you anything. If I can help and give you insights and give you the guide to do it yourself, that's what I'm here for. I'm not in any way trying to get people to work with me as a result of this. So when I talk to non-physicians, people will often say, well, physicians make so much money, so what's the big deal? Why do they need to negotiate? Well, they make so much money relative to non-physicians, but what I'm talking about is being paid fairly relative to other physicians. So we're going to talk about a few challenges that physicians face in the business of medicine. And frankly, the most common one that I experience is that physicians find that there's tension between, trying to do important work and then feeling like there's not enough resources and support to do that at the highest level. So many, the overwhelming majority of physicians I work with say, Ethan, I just want to take care of patients. Like that's all I want to do. Now, I do work with some physician executives. I do work with some physicians who are in leadership, and I always find that to be a really interesting path that you want to take on more. But for the majority of physicians I work with, they say like, dude, I just want to care for patients, and I feel like the business stuff, the admin burden, gets in the way of that. And so we'll talk a little bit about how you can bring more balance and create some boundaries in your work such that you're doing the work that you care about and doing it at a level that is sustainable long term. Also, I sometimes hear this complaint here. It's like, well, if I ask for a salary raise, they're gonna fire me or they're gonna pull my offer. It's like that never happens. I shouldn't say never. I'm sure there's examples out there where it does happen, but in my experience, 15 years as a hospital exec, now 5 years working on behalf of physicians, I don't see offers get pulled or doctors get fired simply for saying like, I hope that we can reach an agreement where I'm paid fairly. And so we'll talk a little bit about how we can debunk that myth, give you confidence, and you'll hear this word again, the courage to advocate for not just for what's important to you, but when you as a physician advocate for what's important to you, guess what? Your patients benefit. Physician burnout is not just a buzzword. It is a real epidemic impacting physicians. And just last week, I sent an email out to my network about it was an article about a resident who had committed suicide during training because of the burden of training, not just emotionally, but physically. And so I really want to challenge you, don't ignore the signs of burnout. If you are feeling stressed, overwhelmed, depressed, any of those feelings that might diminish your ability to provide the best care, please talk to somebody. I know that Nebraska Med has a ton of resources and is here to support you, and I want to encourage you to reach out to them and also talk to your colleagues. A lot of times what I find is physicians will suffer in silence. And then when they say like when someone raises their hand and says, "Hey, I'm struggling," guess what? More hands go up. And so please stay in touch with Nebraska Med for their support, especially because of their focus on wellness. Wellness is the opposite of burnout. And so, how can you get the support you need from this association to help you combat some of these feelings? And don't wait till it gets to an ultimate decision where you have to leave the practice of medicine or, God forbid, something worse. So please, if you're feeling any of these, if you're experiencing any of this, talk to somebody now. There are many physician coaches out there as well who I know personally do good work. A lot of times I'll hear from physicians that they know that they deserve better, but they feel as though in order for them to get better, they need to leave. And again, that's a myth that I want to debunk for you. You can, and again, overwhelmingly, the clients I work with get better pay, better support, and schedules with more balance, staying with their same employer. So you don't have to leave, but you do have to have the courage to stand up and say, I deserve better, and frankly, my patients deserve the best version of me. This is one of the things that doctors are rarely privy to. Now, maybe in the private practice setting, they're a little bit more aware of this just because of the nature of that business model. But I spent my career working in faith based, nonprofit hospitals, multi hospital health systems. And part of my job during those those 15 years was quantifying how valuable Dr. Hanlon's work is to our hospital. Because even if we're faith based, even if we're a nonprofit, we are still a business. And I think the thing that many physicians often overlook is that your work, while you do it for moms and brothers and sisters and uncles, your work has a tremendous amount of economic value to the tune of millions of dollars. And so there's this dissonance for physicians when I tell them, hey, you generate a ton of money for your practice, but yet they're uncomfortable asking for a modest pay raise when they haven't had a pay raise in 5 years. I'm working with clients right now who have a 10-year contract. Started in 2019, it ends in 2029. And 5 years in, they came to me and said, Ethan, we haven't had a pay raise in 5 years. And living in Denver, the cost of living has exponentially increased. So they've taken a pay cut. And so my job now is to help them stand on the value that they generate for their practice and help them get paid fairly for their important work. So the next time you're thinking, well, should I ask for a signing bonus or should I ask for another 30K? Yes, the hospital will make it back. And when they offer you a contract or an offer letter, typically there's wiggle room, right? You just have to ask for it. If you think, well, they're really nice and friendly, so they're doing right by me. It's a business. So ultimately, they have to look out what's in their best interest, and it's important for physicians to have the courage to look out for what's in your best interest. And do not use the G word. There is no such thing as greedy when it comes to fair pay. I so often have to coach my clients on that word is a dirty word. Greedy is a dirty word when we work together. If you're being greedy, it has nothing to do with what you're asking for. Maybe there's something else, but you asking for fair pay, adequate support, resources to provide the best care, that is not greedy. It is fair, appropriate, and more importantly, it's expected. There is a significant disparity in pay by gender. And the reason this has come to my radar is because my mom planted the seed more than 5 years ago and said, Ethan, as a woman physician, there's barriers that I have to overcome that maybe not everyone does. And so I really want to encourage the women physicians who are in the room, the women physicians who are listening to the recording, please, you must advocate for yourself. And because of this gap of $60,000 for primary care and about $100,000 for specialists and surgeons, it it amplifies the importance for women physicians to say, hey, I deserve fair pay. Just yesterday, I got an email from a woman physician who said, well, how do I make sure that I address the potential pay gap? And I said, and she said, well, should I say I want to be paid the same as men? Or no, what you do is you get the data, go to the source. So for physicians who want to know what the benchmarks are for pay, the absolute gold standard is MGMA, Medical Group Management Association. The caveat is that costs money. So yes, I have that because I need it for my work on a daily basis. But for a physician who's only doing this once or twice, maybe 3 times in your career, it may not be as valuable for you. So I would point you towards Merritt Hawkins, which is a free resource. That's also where that data about the revenue that physicians generate. Look at Doximity. They publish a physician compensation survey every single year. Look at Physician Thrive. There are a ton of resources that are free that will help you benchmark your pay. So that way, when you ask for a certain number, you'll know that it's backed by data. And because my mom is a Black woman physician, there are also disparities that she's pointed out to me and are supported by data along racial lines. And so this is from the Medscape Physician Compensation Report. And again, I encourage my physicians of color, make sure that you advocate for yourself. One of the things that physicians often do preparing for contract negotiations is they ask their friends, well, what did you get? Well, if your friends are making less than what the market is, guess what? You've now put yourself behind the market. So it's really important. Again, I'm going to amplify this. Please get the salary data when you go into a contract negotiation. Now, I am not a student loan expert, so my tools are very hammer and nail. They're effective, but they're very much a hammer and nail strategy. And what I mean by that is there are companies like GradFin, Student Loan Tutor, who will help physicians prepare strategies to pay down their student loan debt. And I have friends there, so happy to make connections if that's helpful. Where I come in is helping get your employer to pay. So anytime I negotiate a contract for a client, whether it's a rookie doctor just coming out of training or it's an experienced physician, we always, always, always ask for what's called education loan debt assistance. What that means is your employer will directly pay you or your student loan servicer to pay down your student loan debt. That amount is in addition to your salary, your bonuses, your benefits. So please, if you are not getting support from your employer, specifically for education loan debt, please ask for it. Because I can almost guarantee, except for maybe one or two really lucky situations, if you don't ask for it, you will not get it. And that's kind of the rule of thumb for negotiation is I often say to my clients, closed mouths don't get fed, which means if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. And then, like I mentioned earlier, PSLF, again, I'm not an expert in it, but I know enough to be dangerous. And I know enough to say if you're not enrolled in it and you're working for a 501c3 nonprofit, you need to do that yesterday. So typically, you'll probably know if your employer is a 501c3. Typically, that's going to be academic institutions, faith-based institutions, and government and or safety net institutions who will be 501c3s. I've done a ton of talking, so Lindsay, I'm just going to pause here and see any questions in the chat that we should talk through, or any questions from the group before that had emailed you before that maybe we should. It's a good time to talk through now.
Yeah, I did have one. You did kind of touch on it already, Ethan, but should women modify any of your recommended tactics to be the most effective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, I don't think there's modification as much as there's amplification. So it becomes more important for women to lean on the data to prioritize boundaries. So typically for physicians, you're typically thinking about your work in kind of three phases. Depending on the setting you're working in, usually your clinic time, if you're procedural, there's sometimes like a surgical procedural time, and then there's on-call time. Of course, if you work academics, there's other community engagement, research, etc. But the important thing, especially for women physicians, because sometimes I find them to be overly giving, is make sure there's boundaries. Make sure that you have boundaries. You know what the expected patient contact hours are on a weekly basis. You have time dedicated to admin support, and you have reasonable and fair on-call expectations. And here's the thing, no matter what your gender is, if you're a physician, you're going to help. And we as hospital executives know that if I need Dr. Wergen to do extra, he's going to do it, right? Because he's a physician, he's here for the patients. And so I really want to encourage you create boundaries because that is what's going to be your preservation of your sanity, avoiding burnout is having those boundaries. Doctors never call me and say, Ethan, I'm underpaid, I want to make more money. That never happens. What they do call me and say is, my pay got cut. I got fired from a job. The pace that I'm working at is unsustainable. I haven't seen my family in what feels like months. And so I really want to encourage you, to Lindsay's point, really make sure that you have boundaries in place and those boundaries are respected by your practice. Yeah, great question, Lindsay. Thank you.
We do have another one. Should you ask for a larger amount when asking for a raise? I am worth 1 million, and when the system says, "Oh, we were thinking $1."
Yeah, that's negotiation, right? That is no matter what, that's going to happen. So I like you use the number a million because I often tell physicians you can ask for as much as you want. You can ask for $1 million. The answer is always going to be one of three things: yes, no, we'll meet you in the middle. So there's this really interesting fear that physicians tend to have when it comes to asking for more money. And it actually happened just last week where a general surgery client said, "Well, this number feels really big. Is this what I should ask for?" And when she asked for it, it was, "We'll meet you in the middle." Right? So the number in the middle was higher than what she was initially asking for, even though it wasn't quite at this massive number that she thought was too big for what she was worth. So my job is to help remind you how valuable you are, but it's important to know one, your pay is going to be in somewhat correlated to how busy you are. The rule of thumb is the busier doctors by specialty tend to make the most money. And secondarily, get the data. So if you can support your ask with data, well, here's what other physicians in this market, in this specialty are making. You now have a stake in the ground to say this is reasonable based on what other employers are paying. So yes, you can ask for the biggest number you want, but really what you want to do is make sure it's grounded in your practice of how busy you are, and it's also in some way correlated to some data set that will resonate with hospitals. Now, I've done this long enough that I can tell you no matter what data set you pull your numbers from, the hospital will say, "Well, we're looking at something different." So just prepare yourself. Again, that's also part of that. I'm just going to wear you down in negotiations. And so I think that's a little bit of the reason doctors like to work with me is because this is my job. This is what I do all day, every day. So I've got the time to go round for round with hospital execs.
I do have one quick question again, Ethan, before I have you move on,
Yeah.
that might pertain to what we were just talking about. We have somebody that asked, what's the market value for defined leadership roles physician may take on, such as a medical director, physician leader of a department? It's hard to find market value for certain roles.
Yeah, I would go back to that data. So the data will show you typically when you're in a leadership role, there's kind of two main things. First, you may be a physician executive who gets a salary. So one, you want to know what other physician executives of that specialty with that scope of responsibility are getting. So right now, I'm working with a physician client who is going to be a chief medical officer for a academic health system. And so what we need to know is for that geographic region of the country, is in the Northeast, what is the going rate for a CMO of a multi-hospital health system? Now, the spoiler is you can't just Google that and get a number that's going to be reliable. So that's where you do have to kind of go to some of the more niche resources. I can help point you in the right direction if you want to reach out to me. But the second way, so in addition to kind of the salary approach, if you're a full-time executive, you may also see like a 60-40 split between admin, clinical admin, and then you'll get a pay rate for your clinical work, you'll get a pay rate for your administrative work. I want to caution you, if you are split between admin and clinical, you're probably 100% admin and 100% clinical. That's been my experience working with physicians who take on leadership is your time isn't split. There's just more work that you're expected to do. And you're probably more like a 1.5 FTE than a 1.0, which is full time. Secondarily, the way physician leaders get paid is an hourly rate. So if you are a program director, a medical director, a service line leader of some sort, you're probably going to have to fill out a time card and say, "Hey, I dedicated this many hours of work this month," and then you'll get, $400 an hour or whatever it is for that time. What you want to do is two things. One, negotiate what that rate is for your administrative or leadership work. And again, just go back to the data to see what that says. And I can help you with that. And then secondarily, you'll want to agree on what are the maximum number of hours on a regular basis, on typically monthly, that are dedicated to this work. So a very common way to structure those types of provisions or terms is Dr. Smith will be paid $400 an hour in exchange for her leadership of the orthopedic surgeon program, and it'll be for a maximum of 20 hours a month or 5 hours a week, give or take. So then you'll do the math on, okay, over the course of the year, this is how much that looks like if I do all the hours. But again, there's some administrative burden to that because you'll have to do timesheets, and it's just a process. So those are the two primary ways. One, with a salary, you might be split between clinical admin, secondarily with an hourly rate with a maximum number of hours over a given month or quarter. Yeah, great question, Lindsay. And I know some physicians on the call will likely feel as though, well, other physicians might be able to do this, but not me, because I have this very unique situation that doesn't allow me to negotiate for myself. So I want to hopefully infuse some courage into you by showing you doctors who are actually doing it. So this is an OBGYN client. She got a salary raise of $160,000 per year. She was part of a larger group, and what we did is we advocated for her and her partners together, because what physicians don't often realize is there's power in numbers. When doctors in your practice, in your group, when you lock arms together, your influence and your ability to get what you're looking for is exponentially higher. This is a physician group that I worked with, six women physicians. As a result of working together, they stayed with their same employer. So they did not have to uproot their families. They didn't have to change schools, churches, any social groups. On average, they each got about $135,000 salary raise. And then we also negotiated a $40,000 signing bonus. When you stay, it's typically called a retention bonus for each of those physicians. So the two things that the physicians asked me to commit to when we first started working together is, one, we want to stay with our current practice. We don't want to leave. We love it here. And secondarily, we love working with each other. So we don't want to break the group up. So not only did we keep the band together, but we kept them with their current employer, and they got paid a massive amount of money to do it because they are incredibly valuable. And then also, I often hear like, well, rookie doctors can't negotiate because they don't have power. Well, maybe the numbers aren't as large, but first time attendings can negotiate. So this is a plastic surgeon first time attending. We increased her initial offer by $25,000 per year. Over the 3 years of her contract, that ended up being $75,000 that she earned on top of that, with a signing bonus up front of 50K. So again, please pass the word down to younger doctors. You can and you must advocate for your value. That's incredibly important. Okay, now let's get to the how to. How do you do this for yourselves? And before we get here, because this is where we get really practical, I do want to offer, if you have questions or things come up here that you think are relevant to your experience, let's talk about them. Use this as an opportunity to get some free advice. Lindsay will have some questions in the chat, and let's figure out how we can make this practical and actionable for those of you who are going through this. And also, I do want to offer a pro bono, free, no obligation, 30-minute second opinion on your contract or on your pay, as a result of the kindness of Lindsay and Amy to share this platform with me. So for those of you who are listening, I'll have my contact information on the last slide. You'll take a screenshot of that or take a photo of it. But I'd love to offer you a free, no obligation second opinion on your pay, your contract, and I will do my best to help get you on the right track if you're thinking that perhaps you're not paid fairly for everything that you're doing.
May I
And when I
ask
say
you a
no
quick?
obligation, I mean no obligation. If you decide not to talk to me again, that's cool. I'll wish you the best, but I just want to help.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Can I ask a quick question?
Let's do it. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so I work for an institution that's expanding, and so I believe that they're going to come to me and ask me to take a new role, move to a smaller town, to take a leadership role. If I'm in the same institution, I'm not sure if that means I'm getting a new contract. I don't know how that's going to work. They're going to give me a new role. It's going to be, more money or whatever. all of this can still apply even if you're not getting a new contract. I'm not sure if I will be, but it would be a new role and more pay. So that's the question that I have.
Yes, and typically what you'll want to make sure if are you new to leadership, or are you already doing leadership?
No, I've been recently hired at a new institution. But I feel like because my training was at one of the top institutions, I feel like there's going to be more upward mobility for me because of that. And I feel that this is something that's going to come down in the pike, and I just didn't know if the negotiating aspects were still in play for me.
The negotiation aspects are still in play. The reason I ask if you're new to leadership is specifically because when physicians go from fully clinical to leadership, there's a learning curve. No matter how good of a physician you are, there's a
Right.
learning curve going into leadership. So what will happen is they will probably just tell you, hey, here's your new job description, your new pay rate, sign on the dotted line. And then it will be important for you to say, hey, this sounds great. I'm really excited. There's just a few other things I was hoping you might be able to address.
Okay.
So maybe you don't care about the pay as much, but what you will care about, or at least you should care about, is the schedule. How
Right.
often am I expected to work, especially if you're still doing clinical work? If you're fully executive, you're going to probably be just like the rest of us, 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day, which, as we know for physicians, is not really 40 hours a week. But the things that often get overlooked when physicians go into leadership is support, ongoing education. So I always ask for my newly minted physician executives to have a coach, to have an executive coach who can help them start to build some of those leadership and administrative skills that, yes, they have in the clinical context, but it's very different in the business context. Also, making sure that you have the resources to do your job at a high level. So, knowing what the goals are and making sure that the tools you have are supportive of you achieving those goals.
Right.
So, yes, the hospital will probably try to get you to, hey, this is a contract ready to sign. That's where you want to just take a breath and say, hey, I'm really excited, and I'm hoping that you can also support my success with some resources, tools, and training.
And I would be new to the leadership, so I would be going from a full-time clinical to now at a leadership position at, I guess, hospital X. But it would be new. So you're right about that.
Yeah, I really want to encourage you to lean into the resources. Again, I know doctors are incredibly intelligent and you're really good at your clinical work. I find that the transition into leadership and administrative work can be taxing. So give yourself the best chance for success by getting the resources that will support that success.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. What other questions come to mind that maybe someone is going through something that might feel unique to you, but maybe someone else could benefit from it?
I
I'm
did
sorry,
see
what was the
one.
question? Was that question for me?
Oh no, sorry. It was just for the group. Like if anyone
Oh,
else
okay.
has questions, I think that was such a good question, Dr. Renagi. I was just thinking if anyone else is going through things that maybe they wanted to get some perspective on or chat through.
I did have one that I missed in the chat earlier. Large institutions often will say in these negotiations, our policies prohibit that amount, or we'll have to see what the comp committee says, which you're not invited to. How do you get around that kind of power play?
You cannot get around it. You have to lean into it. So typically what that means, and you're not going to like this answer, but it's just the reality. They're going to say, and I see it all the time. I did it when I was on that side. You're going to see this. Well, and actually I'll just give you the real one. This is happening right now with the group I'm working with. So this group is working for a for-profit national health system. I'll let you guess which one it is. It's really one main one. And there's a bunch of physicians in this group, and they went to the table with their CEO, and there's 8 doctors who are all partners, and they went to the CEO and said, "Hey, we haven't had a salary raise in 5 years. We'd like to be paid fairly for our work, and cost of living has gone up, but our pay has stayed the same." The CEO said, "Well, we can't really do much, but maybe we can find a couple bucks." So they got about 150,000. So over 8 doctors, I'm not sure what that math is, but it's not even touching the cost of living. I'm not even a finance guy, but I can tell you it's not touching the cost of living over a 10-year contract. So these doctors hired me to help support them. And the moment I came in the room, the CEO, all of a sudden his tune changed because he knows what I do. And now they said, "Oh, well, we magically found 400,000 for the whole group." So now we're getting closer to like maybe a 40 to $45,000 salary raise for each doctor. But because I know the market and I know that they're still going to be underpaid even with that amount, my job is now to say, "Hey, super grateful, but the doctors are not going to sign this until it's more reflective of what the market is." And guess what the CEO's response was? And I quote, "Ethan, we have given the doctors the absolute best number we can. We can pay them legally. We cannot pay them a single penny more legally. So you will run into those roadblocks. And that's where you're going to have courage to say, like, I don't buy it. And it's easy for me to say that just because, again, I do this every day. I was on that side. I know the talking points and the shtick they use. Oh, it's out of the budget, and we got to approve this, and fair market value, the F word, fair market value. You're going to hear that one. You're going to hear all of those things. And it's important to say, I believe there's better. And if you're not willing to pay better, then I have an offer from a competing health system that will pay better. Now, that competing health system can be across the street. Violate your non-compete, right? You don't have to be an expert in, well, the FTC, blah, blah, blah. Forget all that. What you need to know is if you violate your non-compete, get your new employer to pay the penalty, right? So I have my clients violate the non-compete knowingly because when they go to their new employer, they're going to write them a check for whatever that, buyout amount is. It's called liquidated damages for the eggheads in the room. But it's what you do is you get the new employer to pay that penalty. So that way, if your employer feels froggy and says, "Well, Dr. Handel, we're going to sue you for violating your non-compete." Yeah, I thought you might do that. Actually, here's the $50,000 to pay for my non-compete violation penalty. See you later. So, and then what you'll find is when you have a competing offer, the tone changes because now that $2 million, that $2.5 million, in that $3 million for surgeons in revenue is jeopardized, and they're not going to let you walk just to help you, to save them 50,000 bucks that they could have paid you on top of your salary. So please know that hospitals, practices, again, I have a ton of love for them. That those are my former colleagues, but they are conditioned to say this is the best that they can do, and they'll get really creative in the ways they tell you no. So you need to prepare for that. This is exactly the process you need to follow. Now, somebody on the call, when I say you need to get a competing offer, they're going to say, "Well, I don't want to leave." Yeah, I get that. You don't have to leave, but you have to be willing to leave. When I talk to physicians who call me about working together, the first question I ask them is, let's say you come back to your employer with very reasonable requests, schedule, support, a little bump in your pay, and they say no. What will you do? If the answer is, "Well, I guess I'll just suck it up and go back to my practice," I'm not a fit for you. And I'll be the first one to tell you, you must be willing to explore your options if you're going to get fair pay. That's a non-negotiable. It's kind of like if you were a weight loss management physician and your patient said, "Yeah, I love the exercise plan you put together. I love the activity, but the food part, I can't give up my Mickey D's or my Wendy's." Then you're not going to lose the weight. So, as a physician, as a weight loss physician, you know that these both are essential. Not just the activity, but also the food, the nutrition are essential parts in weight loss management. Likewise, being a good physician, obviously that's a given, but being willing to look at your options is a necessary part in getting a salary raise with your current employer. And again, I'm a realist and I want to see you be successful. So I'm telling you, if you do try to get a salary raise without being willing to look at your options, you're going to have a terrible time. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to feel like you wasted your time. You're going to feel like you got taken advantage of. And I see that all the time. So again, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I will give you the roadmap on exactly how to do it. So I'll ignore this first piece here. This is the part that I do for my clients. What you need to do first is figure out which practice opportunities could potentially be a fit for what you're looking for. You don't have to go. You can stay with your current employer, but you must have an option. Options equal leverage, leverage equals power. So you must have an option. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to get calls from recruiters who work for the employers, and they're going to say, hey, we'd love to talk to you about what joining our practice might look like. The goal for every interview is to get an offer. If you would not accept the offer if it was given to you, don't take the interview. Don't waste your time going on interviews that you would never accept the offer from. Then, once you have an offer, now you can come back to your employer. Don't start here. Only come back to your employer once you have an offer. And the reason for that is all of the things we've already talked about. When you come to your executive, no matter how nice you think they are, no matter how good a rapport, no matter how many times you go out to dinner or play golf together, if you ask for more money, the answer will be no. I'm just telling you. So please do yourself a favor, save yourself the time and the headache, get an offer first. So that way, when they say no, you can say, okay, I understand that it's not possible to do that right now. I do want to say I've been approached by Hospital X, and they have offered substantially more support, more vacation time, less call, more pay, and I'm strongly considering that. That is when the tone changes because now you're on a level playing field with the people who sign the checks. So please save. I know some of you will still, with your bravado, will go in and try to stomp around and do it yourself. Save yourself the time. It's going to be embarrassing. Just get an offer first, and I guarantee you your success rate will exponentially increase. Now, your pay typically comes in three different categories. None of these can be overlooked. So the base, of course, like this is that big six-figure sexy number that we're looking for to figure out like, is this a good deal? Maybe, but that's just one part of your pay. That's the money that you get just for showing up and doing a good job, doing no harm, honoring the Hippocratic Oath. The three B's are base, bonus, and bennies. Your base is that big six-figure number. Your bonus is the compensation or the pay that you get for achieving a goal or completing a task. It can be something as simple and easy as signing a contract and you get a signing bonus, or it can be something as involved as helping your practice improve its surgical site infection rate or your patient panel's A1C levels. So a bonus can be very important. It can also be incredibly valuable, but you also need to make sure that you're asking for all of the available bonuses. And then lastly, your benefits. The reason this is so important is because one, it has a tremendous amount of value, but often gets overlooked. And two, because it can have a tremendous impact on your lifestyle and your license. So making sure that you have adequate malpractice support, making sure that you have support for ongoing medical education, your vacation time. Does it include holidays or not? Does it support your lifestyle and your travel goals or not? So making sure that you know that your benefits aligns with what's important to you in your practice. I told you I was going to tell you exactly how to do it, and this is it right here. So this is exactly, so screenshot this, take a picture of it. This is exactly the process that I follow when I work with physicians to help them get salary raises. So as I mentioned, an unavoidable part of the process is you've got to get an offer. You've got to get an offer. Having one offer, that's fine, but really 2 to 3 offers puts you in a position of comfort and power. Secondarily, know what the market is for your specialty, care setting, and experience, and also how busy you are. Short and nimble contracts. What that means is 2 to 3 year contracts. Every now and then I see kind of two opposites of like kind of bad terms. One is called evergreen, which means contract never ends. It just stays alive until someone ends it. And secondarily, I see contracts that are really long in term, meaning 6 years or more. So much changes in 6 years, not just how good you are as a physician, like you're going to get exponentially more effective and efficient with clinical quality, but you're also going to probably be seeing more patients and cost of living is going to change. So you want to make sure that you have the opportunity to come back to the table to discuss your pay. maximize your pay. Again, I know doctors didn't get into it to be wealthy, but I believe that doctors deserve to be paid fairly for your work. So make sure that your pay is fair, and you maximize it, because I guarantee you that nobody on the other side of the table is looking out for you to be paid fairly, the same way you are. And then lastly, when you talk about your contract, only focus on what matters to the employer. So often when I was a hospital executive, I saw doctors come in and say, well, I'm a really good physician. My patients love me, so pay me more money. Or Dr. Jones just got this shiny piece of equipment, so I want it too. Those things do not matter a hill of beans to a hospital executive. So you need to talk about how can you improve your volume? How can you improve your outcomes? How can you improve your efficiency? The things that matter to the employer are the things that will help you get what's important to you in your practice. And I'll send this to Lindsay so you all have it handy. But this is what I say are the kind of five provisions that if you gave me 15 minutes to look at a contract, this is where my eyes would go. Because I'd want to know, one, what's the kind of maximum value of this of the contract, and then also what are the potential risks to the physician, their license, livelihood, or lifestyle. And typically these provisions will help illuminate some of those things. And again, I'll share this one with Lindsay as well. But this is just some industry benchmarks. Having looked at thousands of contracts, these are some of the things that I see as pretty consistent across specialty, geography, care setting, etc. So I want you to have this handy. So maybe you can look at your contract and say, oh, well, every now and then I talk to a doc who didn't have a signing bonus for some reason. That's really odd to me. Or what's another one that I often see? Pay time off. You'll sometimes see that not really highlighted. So you'll want to know, what time do I get for vacation, personal time, away from work. And again, I'll ask that you just take a photo of this, screenshot this screen. As I mentioned, I will offer anyone on this call or who's listening to this call, just make sure you let me know when you call. I will offer a pro bono second opinion on your contract, on your pay, and also a 30-minute consultation. So if you want to sit down and talk to me about, like Dr. Ranagi is going into his new job, talk about, hey, what things do I need to look out for as I'm transitioning into leadership? What are the things that are common pitfalls for physicians? Or if you are feeling stuck or frustrated or haven't had a pay raise in a bunch of years but don't know how to ask for one, let's talk about that. I hope that I've come across as like someone who wants to help. Like I genuinely am here to support, and if I can be helpful to you, that's really what my main goal is to have happy physicians. So again, screenshot this, text me, email me, call me, and with that, I'm gonna just pause and just see what final questions did we not chat about that you think would be helpful.
Well, if we, while we're waiting on any questions, I did just want to share my screen back here just for a second. And as Ethan mentioned, you do have resources available in Nebraska, LifeBridge being one of those. And so we do offer free and confidential peer-to-peer coaching. Some of this comes with contract negotiation. We have resources that we work with, and you can call our confidential line that's listed here. Um, and the final one, I just want to share that none of this would be possible without our sustainability partners. And so we thank them for helping to support us and bringing people on like Ethan to help. So I just want to give the last minute or so. I know we're coming to time. Any final questions? I know we have a couple in the chat here. Let's see. Sorry, one question we had was, oh, how to justify an increased pay after adding certifications to your training, but not fellowship like a sports med or obesity med, which I think you talked a little bit, but if you could speak to that while we're wrapping up.
Yeah, talk about clinical impact. So if you have new certifications that allow you to do different procedures, so I know you all care about the patients. On the business side, we tend to think about revenue. And so we're going to want to know, how does this increase the patients I can see? How does this increase the revenue that I get for the procedures my physicians are doing? So, talk about the clinical impact. Are there conditions that you can treat now that are currently not being treated in the practice? Or are there new CPT codes that can be charged that might bring increased value to the practice? That will get their attention and get you in the door. And then you can like talk about all the passion stuff to it. It's cutting edge and it's the tip of the spear. But you got to start with what matters to the employer in the practice first. And then you can support that with kind of the things that are clinically relevant for you. Great question.
And I know we mentioned a lot of resources here. Ethan, you had a lot of different websites, some screenshots available and things that you would share with me. For those of you on the call, I will make sure that I compile all of that along with our recorded webinar. I also wanted to, sorry, real quick, send the CME link and I'll send that in the chat here. That will also be available on our website. Other than that, if there's no other questions, Ethan, thank you so much. This was super informative. I think we had a lot of other questions. If there's things that weren't answered here, send them my way or feel free to reach out to Ethan as well. But thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Man, that was so much fun. What a great start to the day. Thank you so much, everyone. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.